And in your book, on page 36, is a nice table that summarizes some of the very common functional groups that we see in a biological molecule. It's on page 36. Do you think I got all of that? So the functional groups are groupings of atoms that you'll find attached to a carbon chain or a carbon molecule. And the very first one on this table is hydroxyl, which sounds a lot like hydroxide. In fact, the word itself looks like hydroxide, hydroxyl, hydroxide. It's an oxygen and a hydrogen combination, an OH. Now the -il means that it's attached to something instead of just swimming around free in water, like the I is. The I is an ion. The -il usually is, but not always. In this case it isn't. So hydroxyl is the functional group here that we have attached to that carbon. Can anybody find this functional group on that table? Not quite. Carbonyl. And we had that quiz question and we wanted to challenge you on it. Carbonyl. You see the same pattern? You've got the C double covalently bonded to an oxygen, so you've got the 2 covalent bonds there, and a single covalent bond to that hydrogen. That is a carbonyl. Now it's easily confused with this next one, the carboxyl, which has 2 oxygens instead of just 1. And that's the difference there. So, another, actually, not quite. Another really common functional group is the methyl functional group, which is a little different because you often find this in any molecule. It's just the hydrogens around the carbon. You've got 3 of them. I'm going to lose quickly. Another one, the amino group. Amines and aminos have nitrogen. And so when you see that nitrogen attached to a carbon, also like this, that's the amino functional group. And another one, this one we'll be talking about forever and ever, the phosphate functional group. The phosphate has an oxygen initially attached to that carbon, and then that oxygen is attached to a phosphorus, that's the name phosphate, and you've got even more oxygens around that phosphate. Let's try to hold on to the opposite side here. Very important functional group. We see this phosphate in DNA and RNA as part of the nucleotides. You're probably somewhat familiar with those words. Also is an important part of the energy molecule, ATP. You guys know that one? ATP has how many phosphates? Those of you that are shaking your head. T stands for tri. So it has, knowing that, you can guess that it has 3 phosphates. Triphosphate. This table is a really good review table because it has those functional groups drawn out, and it also describes where you would find them. So here the carboxyls you would find in molecules called amino acids and other in fatty acids. They are water soluble, and you can now start just connecting that. Water soluble means it's polar or ionic. And you'll notice in this description it goes right into highly polar. Water soluble and highly polar they're dependent. You can't disconnect those two things. They will always go together. And it even, this is kind of interesting, the carboxyl will even act like an acid, which releases hydrogen ions in the solution, increasing the number of hydrogen ions. And if it does that, is it going to increase or lower the pH? It's going to lower the pH. Catch that inverted relationship. Questions? Okay, now this was the one that blows everybody's mind. Functional groups, I think most people just don't want to learn them. And so they fail to recognize them when I ask you to recognize them on a test. But they're really not very complicated. You just have to memorize the pattern in their name. But getting to the point where the molecule that we were just looking at is exactly the same molecule as the one on the right of this figure, that's a little more challenging. Find it in your book. So, and this is also presented in your book on page 38. Okay, so glucose, this glucose here, the same molecule we had on the last slide, is not usually a linear molecule when it's in solution. When it goes into solution, when it goes into water, it's going to fold in on itself. It's going to fold in on itself, and so that's what's going on here. It's folding in, and that carbonyl is going to connect with that hydroxyl and form a covalent bond right here. And then instead of that linear molecule, you have a circular molecule.